Okay, we're finally to the end. Last video for the week. Just a little summing up on multiplication and the signs. I know you're probably excited to the last video for the week, and you don't have to hear from me till next week. Before we start this video, week one had no evaluations, but please get into your D2L shell and looking for the evaluations. There is some week one homework that you can look at, and there's also going to be an assignment coming up in week two. But on to the last thing here. If we have a negative times a negative times a negative times a positive, okay, what we're going to end up with is an answer that is negative. Because a negative number times a negative number, well, those two signs would give me a positive number. But then a positive times a negative would give me a negative. And a negative times a positive would still give me a negative 168. So the story really here is if you have an odd number of negatives, the answer will be negative. Okay. Now here's how it changes. What if you have an even number of negatives? Well, to get an even number of negatives, all I have to do is make that one negative. Now I have four negative numbers. That's an even number of negatives. Let's look at how it would affect it. This would be also a negative 4. And let's make this better. This also would be a negative 4, right? So the impact it would have is negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. And positive 6 times negative 7 is negative 42. But now we would end up with a negative times a negative. And a negative times a negative is a positive. So what they're explaining on this slide is if I have an odd number of negative numbers, I'll have a negative answer. But if I have an even number of negative numbers, so 4 in this case, I will have a positive answer. Okay? Now what we're summing up on division, a couple things not related to this, but related to 0 that I want you to remember. Okay? Just as we end the week, 0 divided by 14 versus 14 divided by 0. Okay? And think back to when you took your last math course. 0 divided by 14 would equal 0. But 14 divided by 0, a lot of people, well, that's 0 too. That is not 0. 14 divided by 0 is undefined. Now your calculator won't say undefined. Your calculator will say error because it doesn't have another option programmed into it. But if I have 0, I can divide it by anything and get 0. If I have 14 or any number when I divide by 0, I do not get an answer because it's undefined. Okay? So just a little extension to what we've been talking about, just a little reminder when you get into doing some division. All right, have yourself a great rest of the week, and we will see you for week 2. Take care.